So I'm going to give you an overview of where we are with the Royal Navy. I'm going to intersperse it with some real-world examples, both of what we've been up to and a couple that might be of interest to this group, and then how we look towards the future. And that's particularly pertinent given the Strategic Defence Review and the Security Review that's just gone on. And hopefully I'll finish with enough time for some questions at the end. So who we are, there's probably a lot of innovation teams that will put something very similar up. Fewer who can have an autonomous boat with a jetpack marine in the background. However, what I'd like to draw from this is actually our ability within what was then the Office of Chief Technology Officer, where I was the Deputy CTO, but now the Disruptive Capabilities and Technologies Office. We have that remit to potentially do the disruptive, to do something in parallel or juxtaposed to the rest of the more waterfall type procurement that we are used to with defense. So we are trying to work differently here. Our values and principles, what I would like to draw from this, again, a lot of organizations will have a similar thing, is that action over failure. We're very keen to work, we're very keen to co-innovate in a way that we both learn, in a way that potentially I can share some of my assets, some of my insight, test evaluation ranges and scientists, and collaborate with SMEs, with academics, with the non-traditional companies to achieve new effect. And within that, I'm not looking for a bland statement that I'll put on the website. Please, can you provide me with X number of this, which conforms to death stands, which only the primes really understand. But actually, can we bring that technology in? Can we learn together so I can understand what your technology can provide, and actually you can understand what the Navy needs and potentially how we expand on that. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So, a few little examples of what we are currently doing. Quantum technology. And all technologies you can really, when you think about the new, split into enabled and enhanced. So enhanced is what can I do better in almost an incremental step. Could a quantum optical magnetometer give me a better magnetometry capability in a step change, let's say 10%, 20% difference? What I'm really interested in is the enabled. What is completely new because of these technologies, such as quantum gravity gradiometers? Can I now map the world's gravity? Can I start to navigate by gravity, which then means I'm no longer reliant on GPS and satellites, which we're increasingly seeing interfered with Ukraine, Israel, Iran. If you go to gpsjam.org, you can have a look at the current world map and it shows you where there's jamming, and it extends all the way into Poland at the moment. So how are we starting to think about the new events? And as you said, we've had 22 different lines of activity within this space, and we've achieved some national and potentially world firsts. Naval AI Cell. Really interesting to hear the conversation this morning about AI. Again, enabled and enhanced. How are we trying to pivot as the Royal Navy to both understand how we need to change our processes? What do we need to do? Data lakes, understanding our data, capturing our data, using that. We within MOD are particularly bad at doing that and particularly good at trying to capture things on Excel spreadsheets. That is something that massively needs to change if we are going to get to an AI-enabled future force. And then capability development. How do we actually start to employ these? What real-world examples can we do beyond Microsoft Copilot, etc.? And then we have an AI adoption and roadmap. This has been published. If anyone's interested, you can go look that up, and it's on my slide. Modularity. Modularity is a concept in and of itself. When we think about the future Navy, we're thinking about a 10,000 node system rather than a capability as a frigate 132 meters long with, about 120 people on, and it will do one thing. How do you split that into the prime movers and then the sensors, the deciders, the effectors, and pivot through? This was our first stab at it, and it was very successful. This is a hospital in a box. The ability to put it on the back of a small ship, a large ship, or on the dockyard to give a new thing. And that's both in terms of humanitarian aid, disaster relief, and downfield hospital operations, which will save lives. You may have seen the Ukrainian drone attack recently. FCI, who we collaborated with, we have a drone cassette in a box. They went public with that, so I can say that. That's something that we've had for months already. So in terms of both dual use applications and military applications, there's a whole remit to do, and actually that civil military mix is something that I'll explore a little later. Power and energy. What do we mean by climate change and sustainability technologies? I've reframed that into a Royal Navy that is compliant and enabled able to outmatch conventional forces in the climate-changed world. The world is changing. The world is warming up. That means new things are happening. New, for example, sea lanes of communication. The high north is becoming potentially particularly more and more open. And then at the same time, these technologies will revolutionize how we can do persistence and engagement. I'd like to draw attention to the quote at the bottom left, which came from the US. This is back in 2009 when oil was cheap. However, at that point in Afghanistan, per litre of fuel at the FOB, so the forward operating bases, you were looking at $400 per litre in your fuel costs. Now try filling your car up like that. So when we start to think about space-based solar systems, actually, are you talking $400 per litre of fuel if I have a deployable array? Probably nowhere near that amount of cost. So this is where the defense perspective and the deployed perspective, which is equally applicable to the civilian markets, to the remote areas, and to disaster aid and humanitarian relief, find that blend of actually potentially some of the metrics that we use on energy aren't correct. So where is our value and what value are we driving and why are we doing this? As much as there's that green agenda net zero 50, there is a significant amount of what we would call operational advantage to be had from this kind of collaboration. Navy X, our accelerator. So this is our autonomy with Patrick Blackett on the left. She is a full level 4 autonomous system through into autonomy with remote kind of control weapon stations, and then the innovation enablers. UKAA was mentioned. We're in conversations with UKAA about world-leading robotics. How do we have conversations with the likes of the Silverstone Technology Cluster about your robotics and about what you are doing? Ventures. Unusually, we have a ventures arm within the Navy. This is a pre-seed seed type stage, and it's quite small, but actually how can we engage with both the big VC capital guys? How can we paint your business picture in a way that is more attractive to investors? As used by the Royal Navy, as used by the MOD, is actually really, really strong in some certain cases. Is that something that we can work through? Is this something where we can, again, co-innovate and collaborate? London Tech Bridge, first QR code up on the side, is a joint office that we have within London between ourselves and the US Navy. They have a T&Tech system which goes around an iterative cycle where we are looking at both very low TRL, almost like 1 and 2 type level, concept phase, all the way up to VR headsets and how we might get those into the fleet and bring in US investment or joint investment on that. Again, these are the key areas. If you have technology that sits within one of these 5, please do scan the QR code and look to connect with them. Democratization of technology. I'm going to pause on talking about what we've done and start thinking about wider. On the right-hand side of the screen behind me, this was back in 2021 with the scientists that you see quoted on the bottom, who three PhDs, who created a drug system called Megacin. They left a 2015 MacBook Pro running overnight. They'd asked by the Swiss government, what happens if you actually change your drug discovery to a potentially biological weapons discovery platform? Overnight, they generated 40,000. You can see that the reference on the dark blue, the red are the unknowns. 40,000 unknown chemical compounds that could be used in warfare. That is significantly scary. That was done by a couple of PhDs in a 2015 MacBook Pro. Our approach to think about how we actually start to engage the wider audience on the left-hand side is DSTL Stone Soup. This is on GitHub. This is a tracking and target algorithm to have a look at how you might do classification. Searchable, usable, it's got lessons, etc. from DSTL. So how do we start to engage with you in new ways that we don't normally do? Co-innovation. I chose something from the a McLaren series last year because being at Silverstone, I thought I'd find what's the most automotive I've got. But actually the Royal Navy, we have ships, yes, but we operate in the air. We operate with space, we operate with cyber. We have the Royal Marines, one of the premier fighting forces in the world, who are on land and subterranean. There is a phenomenal amount of scope for us to engage in every single facet of almost operational environment. And as we talk about the strategic defense view, we are looking at the integrated warfighter. On the left is my quantum pod. It's basically a mobile laboratory that I can drop off on the back of ships or put in various locations around the UK to give universities and academics or SMEs the ability to come to sea. I'll just pause here, take a photo, and these are on the question slide again. There are various connection points that come through, and I'm going to talk about where we're going with the strategic defense review and the strategic review in a minute. However, we can be a little bit hard to penetrate. My colleague Sharon is here as well from the regional commands. Thank you, waving at the front. We have multiple ways to engage. Some of these might be more appropriate to you. Futures Lab, Hacking for Mod, Defense and Security Accelerator, Defense Ideas, and the Battle Lab. Again, each is a different flavor, each is a different procurement route. But what is the interesting thing about defense? Dual use technology. And again, you were mentioning exportability. A lot of what I am really keen to do is to foster that co-innovation in a way that gives you something that is dual use. I'm not trying to suck in your technology or your company in a way that makes it a defense thing only. That was back in the 60s and 70s in the US leading with space. That was all a government game. Now, actually, dual use, your exportability, the application to the aviation industries, the automotive industries, will drop that technology to something that I can actually purchase when you have the throughput through of a successful R&D bid or spin-out. That is something that I'm very, very, very aware of. On the right-hand side, we have AQUARK, which was a cold atom clock that we took to see 2 months ago. It was in the Telegraph, page 3 last week. That is the kind of power and opportunity that we have with soft influence that we can help to bring, and then their phone has been ringing off the hook since. Again, how do we take something that is really, really novel and explore with that? SDR, we are changing, and there's a lot of realization in defense that we need to be better with the likes of you. Traditionally, we go out to the big, large primes, we put things on the defense sourcing portal, and it comes in almost in an intelligible series of requirements that a requirements manager has written that DNS then try and translate that only a prime can understand. How do we, and we have acknowledged that we need to engage here better. We need to engage with academics better. And there are a lot of coming things that, unfortunately, I can't talk about today because they're all in draft and they're work in progress and they will be almost ministerial type level announcements, but where we will be focusing the RN innovation ecosystem and the wider defense innovation ecosystem under the National Armaments Directorate, under the UK Defence Innovation banner, that will give more access to companies like you that we've never been able to do in the past. Where we're going with the RN, it's 4 missions. Being a mission-led, kind of then the supporting enablers on the left-hand side. Again, this helps us to change the language rather than CASD, continuous at sea deterrence, etc. We love our acronyms that no one can understand. That is significantly more understandable to the likes of you, and then how you would engage with the regional clusters or those other points that I put up. Cantering through. The Defence Industrial Strategy. So this has been released as well. This is what we are trying to achieve as a nation with the likes of UK industry. And we see that prosperity, that dual use exports, that enabling a strong UK industrial base is defence in and of itself. And finally, I will pause there. That has been a phenomenally quick canter through because I'm actually keen to see if there are any questions from the floor. So how do we differ from DSTL and DAFSA? Yes, so DSTL is our laboratories. They've been focusing on generation after next and a lot of support operations. That is the technical house of S&T delivery. DASA is an accelerator. It is one of the programs that I put up there. It is just one of many pipelines that someone can engage with defense. We, within we call us as the FLCs, the frontline commands, have our own innovation houses, whether it's Army Futures, whether it's the Disruptive Technologies and Capabilities Office, or the RAF's Rapid Capabilities Office, or Stratcom's J-Hub. We have our own remits to either pick things from those hubs, from those connection points such as DASA, or work independently. If you want to float it, fly it, or sink it, I have assets. I can get something on the back of a warship and spend a couple of weeks at sea. I've sent scientists up to North Norway and back on our strategic sea lift. We've flown things in collaboration with the Royal Air Force. That's not too difficult. Actually, sometimes what is more difficult is trying to give someone government funding. So how do we both make it more simple for us to give government funding? And there's examples such as the Heavy Lift Drone Challenge, where we used a 3-2-1 lot methodology, where actually, could you bring a heavy lift drone that can get 50 kg the length of runway? Companies turn up, yes, good. And then a series of iterative funding. Okay, now can you do that beyond a visual line of horizon? Yes. Next funding. Now can you do that over 250 nautical miles? And each step, we refined down the companies who basically met those criteria. But what's of interest is when we have done these more agile and iterative things, not one of the defense primes want it. They've subsequently bought out the companies that want it as it goes. But we are looking to the more agile innovators and investors and small companies who are able to work with us to match these opportunities. How do we engage? We have an excellent idea. Which is dual use, for instance, space-based solar power? Do you use grants or are there small pots available? So yes, I've put up some of those connection points, and again, those QRs will be on my slides as they go out. Stand by for further announcements coming out of the Strategic Defence Review and the reform of the National Armaments Directorate. As I said, we do have VC. That's almost at the seed and pre-seed level in collaboration with some of the national investment funds. So it's various and a live conversation. And actually, could we potentially play with, let's say, powering and recharging HAPS in flight? That could be a really interesting application, or a collaboration with the aviation industry or satellite industries that we could look at. And then how do we create that alliance approach to technology rather than a singular defense focus? Can I explain a bit more about quantum technology, what it is and how to use it? Quantum technology is phenomenal. It is going to significantly disrupt and change. It falls into almost a series of categories. There are 5 national missions, of which mission 4, which is quantum-enabled navigation, and mission 5 is the quantum communications and networked situation, which is probably most applicable in the near term. When you're looking at quantum compute, that will be another step on top of everything, and how AI could team with that, that's probably slightly further down the area. But quantum is essentially using atoms, which are the smallest building blocks, which therefore they are a constant, and they do not need calibration, which is quite a step up on some capabilities, which gives you long-term stability to do new things with. But we can have, everyone can find me after if you want to actually do a deep dive into quantum, because that can take some time. How do we ensure in the problem solving DCTO includes services as well as products in outputs? Who said that question, and what do you mean by a service? Oh, anonymous. There we go. So I'll give it a stab then. So when we talk about the future of the Navy and we talk about this 10,000 node beast, actually we're trying to move away from, we've had a ship or a system done by a defense prime, and therefore it's got their vendor lock-in, it's got their IP. If you need to go through them, actually you almost have to come underneath, to what does open architecture look like. So there are systems such as Maple and Eve that we have put out, which are new standards of connectivity, new standards of integrating and interchangeability of those systems. That means that we will be able to go, we need a widget to fit in that sense and decide network to do something. And actually we can be significantly more open with that architecture. That actually means, yes, we could potentially bring services in. What do we think of AI algorithms as a service? That almost, when you shift to every drone is essentially a flying Raspberry Pi, you can get quite creative with what you might want to do with that. So products and services, yes, trying to keep our aperture wide enough open is a difficult thing. We are a team of 30 to 40 with industry secondees kind of swelling and adding to our numbers as and when. But there are, if you read the Strategic Defence Review, there are a series of key technologies where we will be focusing our effort, such as quantum, engineering, biology, AI, those kind of normal, usual things that you see. But actually, how do we translate that into military advantage is a good question. Please, at the top.
Talked a lot about wanting to engage with SMEs and wanting to engage with companies. Having seen a number of initiatives from different defence organisations, the reality often is you don't fit the criteria, you don't have the right records, you don't have the right security clearance, etc., etc. How is the programme going to measure success, its ability to access those SMEs in terms of it just being a desire as opposed to something that's actually going to do?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting challenge. So it's how do we enable better access to ourselves outside of the normal box? There's a great example with HMGCC. You can search it online. This is a co-creation area. Pardon?
We're partners with them.
Oh, you're already partners with them. That's co-creation for the security services, being GCHQ, MI5, MI6, etc. That's phenomenal. The ability that they've set the precedence of being able to redact something that's super secret into a problem statement that you can then work on without having to have security clearances up the yin-yang is a prime example of how we can do it. There are various engagement methods that I've shown up on the slide, and the regional engagement leads who can act as that. And actually having a conversation to help you guys articulate in defense speak what you might be wanting to offer, or sit down and go, okay, you think that your technology can do this, but actually we see that it might be able to do this. That's your dual use application, and that's how you should bid into us, is something that we are really, really open to do, and how we can offer that through those links, through your DASA partners, etc., who will then reach back to us, and then we'll reach into the right areas within the Navy, Army, Air Force, Stratcom to provide that insight, then means that your final proposal is actually well written in terms of our language so that we can actually understand it and then fund it. Position in Navy sustainability. Sustainability is a really interesting thing. So we have the government agenda of net zero 50. That is going to create a huge paradigm shift in our energy requirements and our energy needs. We all know that Internet of Things means that the demand of energy is not doubling, it's more of an exponential increase. And moreover, from warfighting, when we talk about directed energy weapons, how we do that in a way that is renewable, in a way that is sustainable, is almost reformed in our head to the advantages that these technologies bring, because there are significant advantages these technologies bring. In the future, I would see that actually trying to lug diesel around the world is, with the logistics trail and trains, 80% of casualties in Afghanistan came from trying to take the refueling trucks back to the forward operating bases. If we had a sustainable thing, how many thousands or hundreds of lives could have been saved in Afghanistan if we had green tech? When you think in terms of cyclical economy, which then enables persistence, which then enables uncrewed systems to replace manned systems, it's a phenomenal opportunity. So when we talk about almost greening and sustainability, that's actually the benefit that it can bring, rather than what you might see is traditionally actually that green agenda. I don't know what card I'm on yet. I'm just going to keep going until I see something waved. Oh, it's still good, cool. Does the Navy participate to funding into key technologies that are required for the mods to function, and what are they? Yes, big S, little s, sovereignty and assured supply is a really, really interesting question. The kind of big decisions around that are held in main building. You'll find indications of that on the restricted technologies access list. For example, quantum compute is a restricted technology. What that means is if you're doing something within those areas, actually to come and have that conversation with us about those advanced technologies will actually improve your exportability, because having the mod on side and the right connections and links that we can bring with the Department for Trade, with international trade, and with those mod export licenses, which fall under what's called the F680 process, is something that we can help you with. There are conversations that we can have to almost understand what is more exportable, what isn't exportable, and where do our appetite lie. But we are phenomenally and astutely aware of prosperity. The fact that if we can gain investment into your companies that then lifts that up, that is good for the British economy, that is good for British security, and therefore it's good for British defence. And if we can actually have a defence use of it too, then that's kind of an all-round winner. Let's go back to the question in a second. How you articulate what is sovereign and what isn't sovereign, and how you think about your supply chain is really interesting. If you search Bloomberg at the Big Hack 2018, there was a series of reports that they released with regards to massive video compression motherboards, which were produced in a foundry in Taiwan, which were being used for Reaper and NASA and Amazon Netflix, because all of those need to compress massive video files and send them. It went to Canada to get taken apart. And within that, they alleged that the PLA operatives within foundries in Taiwan were actually putting chips on some of these boards because they were so specific that they could only go to basically one or two of these end use cases. That whole thing very quickly went hush-hush and disappeared. You can kind of read into that what you will when the US get involved with something, but go and have a look at that. And how do you know that what you're doing is secure? That's the main thing from our perspective. There are certain regulations at the moment around Chinese EV cars in the US. You cannot bring them onto US bases. How do you assure the technology and the components of the technology that you're bringing in to provide you, but not only with your technology, but actually the protection of your IP within that? There is no recourse to IP laws. You can go search Land, Wind, Land Rover, Land, Wind, and Range Rover online. Again, they look identical. The F-22, F-35, and the J-22, I think, yeah, or J-20, is a Chinese copy of a modern stealth fighter. Now, there are things that you can do as a company to help protect that if it falls into the wrong hands, or if people try and take that apart. We can help you with those conversations as well. And then that creates that overall assurance of supply. We are a small nation. And we do rely on that export. So I'm not trying to block out every single European and US import into your technologies, but being aware of where things like ITAR might sit is phenomenally important to give you that best chance for exportability and the least chance of having someone kind of come ruin your day because they have extraditional laws where they will come and chase you down. So defense can be quite complex, but again, we are here to help you. Department for Trade is here to help you. And it's just having that conversation. Mentioned moving away from data on spreadsheets. Is there a data strategy being worked through? Yes, that is a phenomenally big point in the Strategic Defense Review. That has been published. You can go and have a look at it. Data is an issue. It's also one of our greatest assets, and how we use that better is is understood, and we will be working through. Where is there a shortage of imagination, innovation, or processes against your classification types? Is there a gap to fill? Gosh, that is a large question. How do you do futures and horizon scanning? Again, we try and use almost best of breed what's coming out from the big innovation houses and some of the defense primes. And the Government Office of Science is a useful first step for what a critical and emerging technology should and could be. However, again, if there is something that you are sitting on that you think is phenomenally important or game-changing, submit that into DASA or one of those other calls there, and that will flag it up to us. Again, I'd love to go and have coffee with everybody, but actually I don't have enough time in my day to sit down. So these processes that I've highlighted and will be on the QR codes on my slide are your best way of almost going, hey, MOD, I've got something that I think might help. And the beauty about that is it sits down through the kind of filter level where it hits the right areas within DSTL as scientists who have the deep expertise, and then they'll go, that is most appropriate for Army or Navy or Air Force, and then they'll come and email through to us, and that's almost the overall filtering method that we have. Okay, I've got enough time for one more question. Does our open economy put us at risk due to the significant presence of international companies supplying mod? Again, that is that balance on what is assured and what isn't assured. How do we understand that, okay, let's say you're working with a close NATO ally, France, Germany, the Baltic nations, it's probably going to be okay. And again, there are conversations you can have that around. I did note that the chat earlier about Google and storing your IP and all our data for free. That's something that we need to be acutely aware of. So please do come and have a conversation with us, and we will do the best that we can. If something is so critical, for example, strategic defense and submarines and nuclear warheads, then we build AWE as a government, and then we keep that in-house. But that's an extremely expensive last measure resort. There are many, many kind of tiers that we can do beyond that. But actually, if you have something that is onshore and British, and we can help support that in terms of prosperity. I know that the Export Department for Trade were here as well. That is something where we can collaborate. So thank you very much.